On this episode of Piston Head Garage, we're doing more truck stuff. What's up, YouTube, and welcome to another episode of Piston Head Garage. If you're new to the channel, my name is Garrett, as you can see here. And today's episode is going to be a little bit different, although I guess the same, because Jacob's been posting a couple videos about his truck. I'm going to be doing some work today on my truck. So this is my 2017 Ram 3500, has a 6.7 Cummins. It's a mega cab with the Ram boxes. And I've had the truck for about 3 years now, almost. And it's been really good to me. It's a good, reliable tow rig. I've used it to tow enclosed trailers and stuff like that. And it's great. I love this truck. But it's due for some maintenance. Some of this stuff is going to be just boring maintenance, but I have a couple things that are going to be upgrades that I'm showing you today. And I'm also going to do a step-by-step install on how to do them. So the first thing, while we're staring at the truck from this angle, is the front tires on this thing are basically bald. So the back tires were actually replaced not that long ago, maybe a year ago. But the front ones were brought from the back to the front because they were in pretty good shape. But now, of course, they're wearing out too, just as steer tires tend to do on Dodges. But yeah, so I have two brand new tires to go on the front here. I also have another wheel to go on the truck because this truck does not have a full-size spare. It didn't come with any spare at all, actually. So I bought another matching wheel to match these ones. I'm going to take one of the less cosmetically, good wheels, put it underneath the truck with one of the old tires on it, and then put the new wheel on the truck with the new tires. Yeah, so that's the first step, really, is to get the vehicle off the ground, get the tires off. But before we do that, I will just go over what we're doing next. Okay, now that we got the hood open, the first thing I'm going to talk about is all this junk up and over here. See this actuator back here, this tube? There's an actuator here and some other junk. This is all part of the EGR system, or exhaust gas recirculation system. So basically, for emissions purposes, occasionally it pulls exhaust from the exhaust manifold back along this tube and into the intake to try to reburn it, basically, and reduce the carbon emissions. So we all know that's garbage. It sucks. It just gums up everything. Yeah, it's better for the environment, I guess, but we want the engine to last. This is a Cummins 6.7. It's a pretty reliable engine to begin with, but we want to eliminate any possible failure points that we can. One of them is the EGR cooler, so you can't really see it that well, but the EGR system goes through a cooler that cools the gases down before they enter the engine or back into the intake. And that cooler has seals in it that can fail and allow coolant to enter the intake and then, of course, into the cylinders, and that's not a good thing at all. We definitely don't want that. So this basically eliminates all that junk, blocks it all off, along with there's down here under the shield, there's a valve. It's like a throttle body valve, but instead of allowing air in and out of the engine like a normal gasoline engine, what it does is it closes partially or all the way, I'm not really sure, to help force suction from this tube to pull that exhaust gases into the engine. So because this is all being deleted, this valve is no longer necessary, and all it is now is basically a small restriction in the air system in the intake. So the kit I have comes with the delete for that as well. So the kit I have over here, Amazon special, got this from Evil Energy, I guess is the brand, but I don't really know. It's a pretty good looking kit, though. It comes with, comprehensive instructions, really easy to understand. You've got this is the piece that replaces that throttle plate. It's just a straight through tube. And then all the other bits and pieces in here, like, gaskets for that. You got a coolant bypass hose, all the block off plates, and everything you need basically to delete all that stuff I just mentioned earlier. So that is phase one. And this is phase two. So this truck is well past due for fuel filters, and I've been putting it off because I've been trying to get a kit like this one, but I wasn't sure what to buy. And this is what I ended up going with. This is a black market performance cat fuel filter conversion kit. All right, so pardon the noise of the fan going in the background. That's just a shop heater. Hopefully you can hear me over it, but you can't really see all that well. I'm going to try to zoom in a little bit here to get a better view of it, but way back in there, right in the middle of the frame, I can't get it to focus, of course. That blurry brown thing in there is the engine bay fuel filter housing. So basically there's a cap on top, as you can see that kind of hex shape nut on top of it. That's to pull the cap off. And then inside there is a cartridge filter. So this whole container basically, fills up with diesel fuel, goes to the filter, then goes into the injection pump. The problem with this is it's made of plastic, first of all. So, you know, there's a tendency for over heat cycling, you know, over the time, the cap will basically become brittle, and you go to take it off, it'll just break. And then you need to replace that whole housing. Well, you might be able to get the cap by itself, I guess, but, you know, why bother when you can just replace the entire assembly? So that assembly is part one. The other part I won't show you yet because it's underneath the truck, but there's also a filter that's underneath the bed near the fuel tank that is also, it's basically the water separator filter. So both of those are getting replaced with these kits right here. So we've got, this is the front kit right here. Oh, sorry, this is part of this technically. This is the front kit right here. It comes with the filter adapter. And then of course in the box here, you've got all the fittings and stuff and hoses to fit it to the engine. Bolts right to the side of the block where the other filter housing basically was. And then of course you replace your OEM filter with these CAT filters. The reason why people like to go with these CAT filters is A, they're way cheaper than OEM. A filter change with CAT filters is about $100 less than going with the Mopar filters. The other reason is that these have a finer filtration media in them, so they will filter out a smaller particle. So that's a popular option, obviously. And then of course the water separator, same idea. It's just a better filter, really, for less money, or the equivalent filter at least for less money. So yeah, so that's the front kit. The rear kit is a bit different, mainly because I had to add this to the whole kit. So this is the adapter, same idea. It comes with all the fittings and everything to just plug and play. It's really straightforward. I'm going to show you how to do it. This, however, is an adapter for a fuel heater. So there's actually a little heater, like a little rod that goes in this fitting port right here. You screw that in, and it plugs into the factory harness for the factory fuel heater. This is required when you're in climates where it gets cold. And if you look outside right now, it's wintertime and it's cold. It's actually minus 25 degrees right now, I think, or minus 22, something like that. It's really cold today. And the problem with that is that when diesel fuel gets really cold, it tends to gel, and then it won't be, you can't inject it into the engine and it won't actually burn. So the engine won't start. So to remedy that, they have these heaters. They keep the fuel warm when you're starting it up and when it's running, so that it stays, you know, in a nice liquid form. The problem here is I may have messed up. There is a heater in the engine bay fuel filter assembly as well, and this does not have provisions for that. So I think I needed two of these to really make this work. This just basically, you know, it's like an oil filter sandwich plate kind of thing. It just spins on to this guy, and then the filter spins onto it. So I probably should have put one of these under here as well, but that's okay. We're just gonna bolt it all together and see what happens. I mean, maybe the truck won't run very well when it's really cold, but I'm hoping that it won't get that cold anyway. So anyway, yeah, that's the gist of it. We're going to do the front tires, the new wheel, the EGR delete, and then with all that EGR crap out of the engine bay, I should have a little bit more room to get that filter housing in the front, and then we'll do the filter housing in the back, and then this truck should be ready to go back on the road. Ha! Psych! So actually, we're not going to do tires right now because two reasons. Reason the first being that these lug nuts are spline drive. The socket I have here is the correct one, but I had to borrow this from a friend because for some reason I can't find the one that fits these lug nuts. There was one in my glove compartment that did not fit these, although there is one lug nut on this truck on the back tire that does fit the other one I have. So that was a problem. The second problem was that I got this tire off. I took it off the rim. I went here to my new tire to mount it, and it was at the time that I went to mount it that I discovered that it was the wrong size. So yeah, I wasn't paying attention. This is my fault, partially, also partially the tire shop's fault, because I asked them, I said I want 35 by 12.5 by 18-inch tires, and they ordered me 35 by 12.5 on 20-inch tires. So yeah, these are 2 inches too big on this opening, and it kind of just fell onto the wheel, and I'm like, oh, that seems a bit loose now. So I checked the size, and of course, so yeah, always check the size before you go ahead and start doing this. That's the smart thing to do. I didn't do that. Of course, I looked it up. The invoice I have says that I ordered 20-inch tires, but I know specifically that when I phoned the person and talked to them on the phone, I said they need to be 18-inch. They're 18-inch tires. So there was some miscommunication there, obviously, and I didn't pay attention to the invoice when I paid them because I paid for these in advance before they even ordered them. So I should have looked then and said, oh, wait a minute, these are 20s. Yeah, so that's a problem. So I got to get a hold of them because today is Sunday, so I'm going to call them tomorrow and see if we can get these swapped out because they don't sell these tires in store normally. They don't like them for whatever reason. I mean, I don't really like them that much, but I only needed 2 of them really. So anyway, that's another whole other story. So yeah, so anyway, because I can't do tires now, we're going to go straight on to the EGR Delete. All right, so the first step is pretty simple. You just want to remove this decorative cover from the top here. You have to pull the dipstick out to get the cover off, but then you can just put the dipstick back in and you're good to go. The next thing I did is remove the crossover tube that goes around the front of the engine here. I struggled a bit with these clamps, these V-band clamps. They're stuck on there pretty good from being on for so long and going through numerous heat cycles. So you may have to tap on them or use a screwdriver to pry them out or whatever, but eventually they'll come off. Just remember there's also a 10mm screw or bolt in the front of the tube that attaches it to the engine head, so just make sure you pull that out before you start ripping on the tube. And then once the tube's out of the way, you can remove the actuator. It's on the intake side. It's just 4 bolts. Give it a tap with a mallet and it should come right off. And now you can reuse those 4 bolts to install the block-off plate, and don't forget to secure the dipstick as well. Now for the throttle plate, there's 4 bolts that hold it on. Make sure that you also, of course, undo the connections to it, the electrical connections, and undo the clamp for the boot. Pull the boot off, undo the 4 bolts. That should pop right off. Installing the delete is just as simple as reversal over removal. You want to use the 4 bolts provided in the kit to install the piece to the intake manifold, and then put the boot back on, tighten it down, you're good to go. Make sure you also tie off the electrical connections somewhere that they're not going to get caught up in anything. They shouldn't really be a problem, but Alright, so now onto the exhaust side of the engine. The first thing I did was remove the actuator that sits on top of the EGR cooler system there. There's a few bolts on the front of this flange here that I'm undoing first. Once those are out of the way, that butterfly valve assembly can come off. And then you either need to disconnect the cables from the actuator or remove the actuator itself as well. I kind of did it one step at a time, where it's actually probably easier just to remove the entire thing as one assembly. But, do what you got to do to get it off, and then you can move on to the next step. So what you want to try to do next is remove this adapter piece, this plate in the front here. There's a V-band clamp and then 2 nuts that hold it on. All right, I've skipped ahead a bit here, and I'm going to tell you why here in a second. So the next step basically to getting this out is, after you've removed all the actuator and everything up here, is there's 2 nuts here and here. And as you can see, one of them is gone, the other one is still there. That's because I just can't seem to get a wrench on that. Now, from what I understand, you could get in there with like a stubby and pry on it, or make a custom like bent wrench or something like that. I'm thinking I might try to get a crow's foot for it, or what I've actually done now is I've removed this V-band here. Now there's bolts here, 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 and here. The 2 at the back, or the 2 on this side, are holding some brackets and stuff for this breather hose and stuff. So you got to undo all that, unplug or remove that sensor right there from here. It's a 7mm bolt. Pull that out. Now Now, in order to get, there's a coolant tube that runs across over here. It goes into the back of the cooler down there, and it goes into this tube down here. In order to get that tube out, you have to take this breather cover off, which covers your PCV or PVC, whatever the hell you want to call it, the filter that goes under there. You pull that off. This comes with it, right? And then you can pull this tube out. Or you can take some side cutters and chop this piece of plastic here around like I have. Doesn't look the prettiest, but it allows you to remove that tube without taking this off. Now, the mistake I did make was that you don't need to remove the tube from back here. You only need to remove it from here. Pop it up, and it'll come off with the cooler. So I accidentally popped it out of there, and I dumped probably like half a gallon of coolant on the ground. That normally wouldn't be a problem if you do it the right way, which I didn't do. So just keep in mind, if you can keep that into the tube in there, you won't dump a bunch of coolant on the floor like I just did. So that's why there's coolant everywhere, because that's only the coolant that came out of there is what was in the cooler. So by removing it, I'm removing that coolant even if you don't dump it everywhere. So you shouldn't need to top up the cooling system after this. You know, maybe like a couple ounces, pretty much, if anything. So anyway, what my plan is, so I've undone these bolts. There's 2 bolts on the side that hold some brackets as well. I undid this clamp, and then there's 2 more bolts, nuts like this one back here, way back in there. You can't see it. But they look identical. Fortunately, though, with this longer ratchet here and an extension, I was able to go back there and undo both of those. So this is now loose. So what I'm planning to do is to lift the cooler up. You got to push it back to get it out of this right here. There's this little fitting. It's just like a O-ring fit, so it goes backwards. So I'm going to lift it up, push it backwards to get it out of there, and then hopefully it'll separate from this gasket here. And then I can pull it out, get the cooler out of the way, and then maybe I can come in from behind with a wrench to get that off. That's the plan anyway. If not, then I'm going to have to get some crow's foot wrench extension things and try that, or I might have to customize my own little stubby wrench or something, or just buy a stubby wrench, 15 mil. But anyway, let's see if we can get this out now, and at least that gets us ahead of the game. So once I had the cooler out, I just went ahead and put the block-off plate on the back port there, just so that way it was done and there wouldn't be anything falling into the exhaust. Okay, so now that's out. There's 2 13mm bolts that are hidden underneath this cradle right here. One back there and one up here. And once you take those out, then this comes out like so. And you can see here, bolt there, bolt there. Now I went and pulled one of the manifold bolts out, so I gotta go find that because I dropped it down there. But that should give me enough room to get at that nut right there and take it off. So let's give that a go. All right, that did the trick. As you can see, nuts off. And boom. So now we just gotta put the block-off cover on there. I should also note that the intake had to come off to get that cooler cradle that I showed you there in the last clip. To get that out, the one bolt is just inaccessible, I think, from the top at least, with the ratchet or anything, unless you pull that out of the way. So just FYI, it's had to come out as well. Yeah, so that's the next step, is to put that block-off plate on, and then we can move to these coolant lines and breather lines. So what I'm doing here is installing the barb adapter fitting that comes with the kit, and there's a lock collar that uses set screws to hold itself onto the tube that's on the engine. So you just gotta tighten each one down equally, and then it should stay in place. Following that, you can thread on the barb fitting that goes into the cylinder head, and then install the supplied bypass hose onto the adapter fitting, as well as the barb fitting that you installed earlier. All right, so I've got the intake back in here. And then all the hoses are rerouted here. This sensor gets plugged back in, screw it down, make sure it's plugged in with the security thing here clipped in. This sensor gets plugged back in. This was from the actuator for the EGR. That just stays wherever you want it to, dangles, tape it up, whatever. This particular kit is unlike any I've seen so far looking on YouTube and stuff. It came with this little standoff right here that it just screws onto the stud for the exhaust manifold, and then there's a bracket that comes with it that bolts to this standoff, and then this piece here, this guy here, as well as the hose back there where it's zip tied, that gets zip tied there. This and this get bolted, and then there's another bracket back here that gets bolted. It comes with all the bolts and the nuts to do all that. So this is all mounted nice and secure. The adapter that goes in here is a barb fitting with an O-ring. Make sure you lube the O-ring with either a little bit of coolant or I use silicone grease. And then this has a collar here that locks the fitting in with a bunch of set screws. Just tighten those down, and that's that. Down here, the stock fitting that had the O-ring on it gets removed. I saw another kit where you just reuse the existing piece here and leave the O-ring in or whatever and clamp it down. I think that would probably work fine even with this, but the fitting came with it, so I stuck it in there with some Teflon tape. Clamped it down with the hoses. This hose isn't quite the perfect shape for this, but it'll do the job anyway, as you can see here. So yeah, block off plates are in. This side's already been done here. We got the block off plate there, the throttle valve delete. So it should be good to go. I did plug in these. These are back here. So I think I've got everything covered. There's some connectors. I zip tied these connectors off here. They were the ones for the throttle valve and the EGR actuator thing up here. So those are no longer needed. I just kind of tied them out of the way. So yeah, I think this thing should be ready to fire back up. So you want to start it up, check for any leaks around this fitting here and in here. That should be the only real spots to worry about because everything else has been blocked off. Obviously, check for exhaust leaks here. There's the that little set screw or plug, sorry, in the middle of that block off plate there. That's if you want to install an external like EGR probe or something like that. That wasn't fully tightened when I got it, so make sure you check that. If it comes with it, tighten it down. I didn't put any kind of sealant or anything on that there. It shouldn't really need it. If I get a little bit of exhaust or sooting around there, I might take it out and put some sealant on it, but for now I'm not too worried about it. But yeah, here is the pile of junk that got pulled out of the truck, and there's a whole bunch of bolts and nuts in here that are completely useless. So yeah, it saves a whole bunch of stuff out of the engine bay. Now I can put the plastic cover that's right over there. That can go back on here as well. But before we do so, I'm going to get to work on the engine bay fuel filter. All right, so I fired the truck. It runs great. No leaks. Everything looks good. All the coolant that I spilled everywhere just burned off or whatever. Smoked myself out of the garage, of course, because I didn't have the door open enough. But yeah, everything's good there. So that means we're done on the EGR delete. And I think this might go a little bit long, so we're going to cut it off here, and the fuel filters are going to be part of the next video. So anyway, if you like the video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe. And yeah, look forward to the next video. As always, I'm Garrett, and I'll see you next time on Piston Head Garage.